The Sudanese Armed Forces of the Armed Forces of the Republic of Sudan. They number, according to 2011 IISS estimates, 109,300. They comprises land forces, a navy, an air force, and a popular defense forces. They also previously had joint integrated units formed together with its rebel enemies, the Sudan People's Liberation Army. The armed forces operate under the authority of the People's Armed Forces Act 1986. In 1991, the Library of Congress used the term Sudan People's Armed Forces to refer to the entire armed forces, but by the late 2000s, the Sudanese Armed Forces term was most widespread. In 2004, the Federal Research Division of the Library of Congress estimated that the Popular Defence Forces, the military wing of the National Islamic Front, consists of 10,000 active members, with 85,000 reserves. It has been deployed alongside regular army units against various rebel groups. Sudan now receives most of its military equipment from the People's Republic of China and Russia. Sudan has a weapons production company called the Military Industry Corporation. Sudanese Army. The origins of the Sudanese Army date to Sudanese soldiers recruited by the British during the reconquest of Sudan in 1898. Sudan officially became the Anglo-Egyptian Sudan in 1899. The highest-ranking British officer in Egypt, known as the Sadr, also served as Governor-General of the Sudan. In 1922, after nationalist riots stimulated by Egyptian leader Saad Zalal, Egypt was granted independence by the United Kingdom. The Egyptians wanted more oversight in the Sudan and created specialized units of Sudanese auxiliaries within the Egyptian army called al-Awtira. This became the nucleus of the modern Sudanese army. The British Army formed the Sudan Defence Forces local auxiliaries in 1925. The SDF consisted of a number of separate regiments. Most were made up of Muslim soldiers and stationed in the north, but the Equatoria Corps in the south was composed of Christians. During World War II, the SDF augmented Allied forces engaging Italians in Ethiopia. They also served during the Western Desert Campaign, supporting Free French and long-range desert group operations at Kufra and Jala Oasis in the Libyan desert. In 1947, the Sudanese military schools were closed, and the number of Sudanese troops was reduced to 7,570. In 1948, the First Arab-Israeli War broke out. Sudanese Colonel Harold Saleh al-Malik selected 250 combat-seasoned soldiers who had seen action in World War II. They arrived in Cairo to participate in a parade and were then dispatched to various units of the Egyptian army. This was a grave mistake, for the Sudanese had fought together in World War II and this broke unit cohesion. The decision was indicative of Egyptian military planners of the period. 43 Sudanese were killed in action in the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. In 1953, the British and the new Egyptian government reached an agreement that Sudan was to be put on the path of independence. General Ahmed Mohammed became Sudan's first army chief in August 1954. This is significant for the Sudanese, for it was the first time it had an independent army that was not governed by Britain or Egypt. In March 1954, British troops in the Sudan consisted of one battalion stationed in Khartoum, reporting ultimately to the Governor-General. The Governor-General's military commander was the Major General commanding British troops in the Sudan, who was also Commandant of the Sudan Defence Force. In this post from 1950 onward was Major General Reginald Cullius Coons. The last British troops, 1st Battalion Royal Leicestershire Regiment, left the country on 16 August 1955. All of the British troops were gone by the end of August 1955. The Equatorial Corps mutinied at Torit on 18 August 1955, just before independence, prompting the formation of the Anyanya guerrilla movement and the First Sudanese Civil War. A company of the Equatorial Corps had been ordered to make ready to move to the north, but instead of obeying, the troops mutinied, along with other southern soldiers across the south in Juba, Yai, Yombo, and Maradi. At independence in 1956, Sudan's 5,000-man army was regarded as a highly trained, competent, and apolitical force, but its character changed in succeeding years. To deal with the southern insurgency, the army expanded steadily to 12,000 personnel in 1959 and it leveled off at about 50,000 in 1972. After independence, the military, particularly the educated officer corps, lost much of its former apolitical attitude. Soldiers associated themselves with parties and movements across the political spectrum. On November 17, 1958, the Army's two senior generals, Major General Ibrahim Aboud, the Armed Forces commander, and Ahmed Abdel Wahab, seized power in a military coup. First writes that the coup in the Sudan, far from being a takeover by the army, was a handover to the army. It was a coup by courtesy, in response to the demand for emergency measures by the head of government. Aboud was forced to step down in 1964. During 1969, the Sudanese army consisted of about 26,500 men, 4 infantry brigades of 4 battalions each, 3 independent infantry battalions, 1 armored regiment, a parachute regiment, an armored regiment and 3 artillery regiments. There were 50 Alvis Saladins, 60 Ferret armored cars, and 45 Commando armored cars, about 50 25-pounders, 40,105 mm howitzers, 20,120 mm mortars, and 80 Bofors 40 mm guns. On May 25, 1969, several young officers, led by Colonel Jafar Namiri, seized power, thus bringing the army into political control for the second time. From 1969 until 1971, a military government, the Revolutionary Command Council, composed of 9 young officers and 1 civilian, exercised authority over a largely civilian cabinet. The RCC represented only a faction within the military establishment. From 1971, Namiri led a more civilian-based government. The First Civil War ended in a negotiated settlement in 1973. Sudan sent at least 1 infantry brigade to the Sinai Peninsula as a reinforcement to the Egyptian forces during the 1973 Yom Kippur War. It arrived too late, on October 28, 1973, and saw no fighting. The Second Sudanese Civil War broke out again in 1982 and continued until 2005. As part of the Addis Ababa Accords ending the Civil War, 6,000 of the former Anyanya guerrillas were to be integrated gradually into the National Army's Southern Command to serve with 6,000 Northerners. By including Southern officers in the top echelon of the Southern Command, the two forces appeared to have meshed successfully. In 1982, it was estimated that Southerners outnumbered Northerners 7,000 to 5,000 in the Southern Command, but there were relatively few Southerners stationed in the North, and none held important positions. Namiri's decision the following year to transfer Southern troops to the North because of his doubts over the loyalty to the central government was resisted by the Southerners and was one of a number of factors that triggered the renewal of the Civil War. By the time of the coup in 1989, over 50% of most army units were staffed by soldiers and NCOs from the south. Most had little commitment or dedication to the government. They joined for the sugar and other rations given to soldiers, as well as the salary. Although they often acquitted themselves well in battle, generally surrendering only when the food and ammunition were depleted, they had little stomach for offensive operations. The land forces were basically a light infantry force in 1991, supported by specialized elements. Operational control extended from the headquarters of the General Staff in Khartoum to the 6 regional commands. Each regional command was organized along divisional lines. Thus, the 5th Division was at Al Ubaid in Kordofan, the 2nd Division was at Kashim El Gherba, the 6th Division was assigned to Al-Fashir in Darfur, the 1st Division was at Juba, and the 7th Division was at As-Shajara just south of Khartoum. The Airborne Division was based at Khartoum International Airport. The 3rd Division was located in the north, although no major troop units were assigned to it. Each division had a liaison officer attached to General Headquarters in Khartoum to facilitate the division's communication with various command elements. This organizational structure did not provide an accurate picture of actual troop deployments. All of the divisions were under strength. The 6th Division in Darfur was a reorganized brigade with only 2,500 personnel. Unit strengths varied widely. Most brigades were composed of 1,000 to 1,500 troops. Keegan, writing in 1983, indicated that the Northern Command was located at Shandi. To reduce the pressure on the regular armed forces, the Sudanese government made extensive use of militias, such as the South Sudan Defence Forces. This largely symbolic coalition of 7 groups was formed with the signing of the Khartoum Peace Agreement with the NIF in 1997. The SSDF was led by former Garring Lieutenant Riek Machar. In 2007, the IISS estimated that the SAF had 104,800 personnel supported by 17,500 paramilitary personnel. Jane's Information Group said in May 2009 that there are a number of infantry divisions, divided among regional commands. The commander of each military region traditionally commanded the divisional and brigade commanders within his territory. It is understood that there are 6 infantry divisions and 7 independent infantry brigades, a mechanized division and an independent mechanized infantry brigade, and an armored division. Other elements are understood to include Special Forces Battalion with 5 companies, an airborne division and a border guard brigade. Support elements include an engineer division. Janes reported the Army's strength as 100,000 plus militias. Info has reported that the 1st Division at Juba has been disbanded. Jane's Sentinel reports that there are 2 engineer brigades supporting the 9th Airborne Division. Jane's Amphibious and Special Forces 2010 lists the 9th Airborne Division headquartered in Khartoum, which includes 2 airborne brigades and the 144th Special Forces Battalion, an anti-terrorist unit. It also mentions the 2 engineer brigades for Special Forces support. It was reported that a Republican Guard exists as a presidential security unit led by Major General Khalid Hamad. Following the 2005 Comprehensive Peace Agreement which ended the Second Civil War, the Sudanese Armed Forces formed joint military units with the Sudanese People's Liberation Army. These units, the Joint Integrated Units, were commanded by Major General Thomas Cirillo Swaka. With the probable dissolution of the JIUs following the Southern Sudanese independence referendum 2011, the SPLA components are expected to be either integrated back into the SPLA or be demobilized. The SPLA components, however, are lesser concerned than the SAF components. Many of the SAF Juba personnel are former militia who were aligned, rather than being formally incorporated, within the Northern Army. Aside from regular SAF units in locations such as Malakal and Bor, many of the SAF elements of the JIUs hail from the areas where they are serving and have strong family ties in these locations. As with the SPLA components, integration into the SPLA or increased incentives to demobilize are the only options the SAF components are likely to consider, movement north being out of the question. The military and allied militias have fought in the Sudanese Civil War, the Darfur conflict, the Sudan SPLMN conflict and the 2012 South Sudan border conflict. Education and training. The military college at Wadi Saidna, near Omdurman, had been Sudan's primary source of officer training since it opened in 1948. A two-year program, emphasizing study in political and military science and physical training, led to a commission as a second lieutenant in the SPAF. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, an average of 120 to 150 officers were graduated from the academy each year. In the late 1950s, roughly 60 graduated each year, peaking to more than 500 in early 1972 as a result of mobilization brought on by the First Southern Rebellion. Students from other Arab and African countries were also trained at the military college, and in 1982 60 Ugandans were graduated as part of a Sudanese contribution to rebuilding the Ugandan army after Aman's removal from power. Equipment. The modern Sudanese Armed Forces is equipped mainly with Soviet, Russian, Chinese, Ukrainian, and Sudanese manufactured weaponry. Significant data has been made available by the UN experts groups on the Sudan on arms supplies to Sudanese forces. The standard IISS assault rifle is now an H&AMP KG3 variant that is domestically manufactured by Military Industry Corporation, the DINA. The IISS reported in 2007 that the SAF had 200 T-54 55ths main battle tanks and 70 Type 62 light tanks. By 2011 the total that the IISS listed was 360 to 20 M60, 60 Type 59, 270 T-54 55ths, and 10 Al-Bashir. The Al-Bashir is a licensed version of the Type 85 M2 tank. In addition, the DINA modernization program for the T-55 has been reported. Chinese Type 96 tanks have also been known to serve in the Sudanese army. These are by far and away Sudan's most modern and powerful tanks. The IISS reported 218 armored cars in 2007, alongside 15 Soviet BMP-2. Also reported were 42 US M113, 19 US LAV-150, V-100 Commando, Soviet BTR-152, BTR-50, 20 Czech-Polish OT-62, OT-64. 104 Egyptian Walid were ordered in 1981 to 1986. The IISS estimated in 2011 that Sudan had 778 plus artillery pieces, including 20 US M101, 16 D-30, Soviet D-74, Soviet M-30, and 75 Soviet 130mm M46 Type 59I. The IISS estimated in 2011 that the Army had 20 pieces of self-propelled artillery, including 10 Soviet 2S-1 Gvozdika and 10 French MKF-3. Multiple rocket launches include Soviet 122mm BM-21 Gradin Type 81. Also reported were Soviet M43 mortars. Anti-tank and anti-aircraft weapons reported included a number of British-made Swingfire 54 Soviet 9K-32 Strela-2 were reported, and many anti-aircraft guns. According to a UN official document, Sudan also allegedly has 10 T-72s provided by Ukraine. In stock G6 howitzer. Air Force. The Sudanese Air Force operates a number of aircraft, including Mi-24 attack helicopters, Chengdu J-7 fighters, MiG-29 fighters, Su-25 close air support aircraft, and Q-5 Fantan ground attack aircraft, and Antonov medium and long transport aircraft. A long-established training center and air bases at Wadi Saidna, where No. 2 Fighter Attack Squadron SUAF operated J-7s for a period. The armed forces have suffered significant numbers of senior personnel killed in several aircraft crashes, in 2001, and in August 2012. Navy. Jane's fighting ships for 1999 2000 stated that the Sudanese Navy was established in 1962 to operate on the Red Sea coast and the River Nile. In 1999, estimated naval strength was 1,300 officers and men. Reported bases were at Port Sudan and Flamingo Bay on the Red Sea and at Khartoum. The Navy had two 70-ton, 75-foot Qadir-class coastal patrol craft and Karari, both transferred from Iran to Sudan in 1975, as well as 16 inshore patrol craft and two supply ships, 4 Kermuk-class patrol boats, 1 Swift ship-type patrol boat, 4 ex-Yugoslav patrol boats, 3 SOAR-type patrol craft, 2 Sabat-class amphibious transport supply boats. The Navy, according to 2004 estimates from the International Institute for Strategic Studies, now has 1,800 personnel, and a base at Massaguayawi on the Red Sea.